Right, so let's just finish with what I hinted at earlier, my position on climate change and global warming. Now listen, I try my very best to view and consider all data objectively, and I see it as a very good thing to question what I'm being told to blindly follow. I believe it's vitally important to look at all sides of the matter, and by doing so you generally find that nothing is black and white, and the truth is never that clear. So for a lot of people, it's very hard to care about global warming when you're both cold and skint, especially when those who are trying to punish CO2 producers are themselves travelling thousands of miles around the world in private jets to talk about it, when they could have just used a Zoom meeting like the rest of us mugs. And not to mention that those very same people are buying up beachfront real estate despite rising sea level predictions. So firstly, we're led by a bunch of hypocrites, but that's nothing new, is it? Now this is information that you can research yourself. The atmosphere is only 0.04% CO2, which has risen by 33% since the Industrial Revolution, meaning that it was only 0.03% at one time. Now understand this, that below 0.02%, all life on Earth ceases to exist. And as I mentioned previously, there was 10 times the current levels in our atmosphere, which contributed to an abundance of life like no other time. You can also find evidence of a far hotter climate, just like in Iceland, where there are fossils of temperate climate plants, whereas today it's far too cold in that region. Also, we're still in an ice age, believe it or not, because we have permanent ice on the land, whilst that wasn't always the case in Earth's history. Crude oil, by the way, comes from ancient algae and can be grown yourself at home to create biofuel, and that's using nothing but the sun's energy and an air bubbler. Just watch Cody's lab, he did exactly that experiment. Now the actual shocking part, which should bring some revelation, is that humanity has only contributed 3% of all CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. That means 97% has all come from nature. And by the way, the 3% of 0.04% of CO2 in our current atmosphere is only 0.001%. So look, if that's true, then mathematically, even if the entire world stopped producing CO2, meaning nothing is breathing anymore, then it will make zero impact on global warming and climate change. It will simply continue regardless. Now I'm actually reading the rising temperature changes very differently to what is being projected by mainstream scientists. I'm not a scientist, I'm just a grumpy git in a shed. But hear me out. This is what the data says. Right, so the data is that in recent history, industry has increased. At that very same time, CO2 has increased and global temperatures. But those are not the only factors. For a start, we've seen a huge amount of sunspots radiating towards the Earth over the past 60 years. That's definitely a factor. We also have a huge amount of concrete, asphalt and paving over our land, which absorbs heat from the sun and then releases it back slowly. Also, the covered land stops water from the rain being absorbed, and instead it's all moved into drains very quickly and into the rivers, which causes them to flood. But this is the biggest factor. We have permanently deforested at least 420 million hectares of forest since 1990. I mean, since I've been alive, there's been an area the size of Europe that has been destroyed. And here's a key thing. Trees have this amazing ability not just to absorb CO2, but they control climate and regulate water. Have you ever noticed how cool it is in the woods on a hot day? Do you even spend time in nature? For example, one English oak tree absorbs 68,000 litres of water a year. Just one. Think about that. Britain actually used to be one huge forest, but now because of industrial farming, it's become a wasteland. The soil biology is dead, the rivers are dead, there is mass extinction of insects, and we wonder why. Now this used to be taught at school, but the more CO2 there is, then the more plants, trees and algae keeps growing, which negates excessive buildup of carbon dioxide, which also increases the acidity of the ocean, killing further habitats. So the government's plan to tackle this is extra taxing, increasing the cost to the most vulnerable, and increasing restrictions so you can't use cheap and reliable energy. To me, this doesn't make sense unless it's corruption. But the climate, without doubt, is changing. I'm not denying that. And I strongly recommend watching the documentary called The Dimming. for another perspective on that. So in conclusion, I believe that CO2, carbon dioxide, is the least of our worries. Climate change is happening. It cannot be stopped. So the only thing I see to do is to adapt and use what is abundantly available. There is no evidence to say that climate change is the end of all life. And instead there is a lot of evidence to suggest it supports even more life. Personally, I want nothing from the government. Instead, I want them to stay out of my business and stop stealing and wasting my hard-earned money on things that benefit no one other than themselves. As it's been said before, you either know your history or you trust government. You cannot do both. However, I actually am a reasonable man. If you agree or disagree with anything that I've said, the important thing is that there is discussion. No one should be silenced for voicing what they believe, because they could be right. So look, if you've got a good argument against anything that I've said, then let's hear it. Freedom of speech is welcome here. YouTube might regulate it, but I welcome it. Otherwise, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe. For you, it's going to cost you absolutely nothing, but to me, it really makes a difference. And it'll enable me to find the most cost-effective solutions to the rising costs of basic living. If you like this video, then can I recommend this one? Otherwise, can I encourage you to stop watching, get out there in the real world, and to forge for yourself a life worth living? God bless you.